Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Brandon was used to his monthly work trips. Every first Monday of the month, he'd pack his bag, leave a sweet note for Haley, and head out with his mind focused on what he needed to handle at the company's headquarters, just a few hours away. Their agreement had always been clear: he spent 3 weeks at home and 1 week away, working in person with the team at the other office. Over time, it had become routine. Haley seemed to handle it well, or at least that's what Brandon believed. That week, he left just like always, with the same goodbye kiss, the same promise of "I'll be back before you know it," and the same confident smile he always wore. Haley hugged him, wished him a safe trip, and he left without any idea that things were about to go off track. On the second day of the trip, late in the afternoon, an unexpected storm hit the entire region where the company operated. The servers went down, systems crashed, and within hours, the entire team was sent home until everything could be fixed. The trip that was supposed to last 7 days would end on day 2. Brandon was frustrated by the technical issue, but on the other hand, he saw a rare opportunity. A chance to come home early and surprise her. He got in his car, set the GPS for home, and started thinking about how to make the night special. He stopped by a local winery and bought Haley's favorite bottle of wine. Then, he picked up dinner at a Thai restaurant, the dish she always said she wanted when he came back from a trip. The plan was simple but full of meaning: walk through the front door unannounced, find her watching a show or already in bed, show her he'd come back just for her, just because he wanted to be close. On the drive, he kept imagining her reaction. He pictured her smile, maybe a little shock, followed by a tight hug. He was eager for it. He checked the clock, calculating how much time was left. He'd arrive around 10 p.m., a time when she was usually already settled in. It was perfect. She'd never see it coming. When he reached their street, he parked in front of the gate, turned off the engine, and held the bags with wine and food for a moment. He took a deep breath, trying to hold back his excitement, and turned the key in the front door. What he found was nothing like he expected. The silence was thick, no music, no candle scent, no sign of her at all. The house was completely dark. For a second, he thought she might be asleep. But that bothered him. He left the bags on the kitchen counter and went upstairs to the bedroom. The bed was untouched, pillows in place, no sign anyone had been there. He grabbed his phone and called Haley. Before he could say anything, she answered in a soft voice, saying she'd just laid down. She mentioned it had been a long day, she was tired. Brandon stayed quiet for a few seconds, absorbing every word. He asked if she was in bed, and she confirmed it, casually. Still holding the phone, he looked at the empty bed in front of him and felt the first cut of the night. He wished her good night and hung up. Now, the doubt was unbearable. That phone call had planted something inside him that needed to be settled. With his phone in hand, he opened the car insurance app. The tracker installed in Haley's vehicle showed real-time location. The dot on the map indicated the car was parked just a few blocks away. And it wasn't at a relative's house or a restaurant, it was in front of Kevin's place, his cousin. Brandon's mind started racing. It was impossible not to remember all the family gatherings, the backyard barbecues at their aunt's place, the innocent conversations between Haley and Kevin, the jokes about football, the shared laughs. It had always seemed normal. Nothing had ever stood out to him. But now, everything felt suspicious. Every hug, every joke, every glance. He stood up, grabbed his car keys, and left without saying a word. The GPS address made it clear where her car was. He drove there in silence, trying to hold back the anger growing with every block. When he turned the last corner, he saw Haley's car parked in front of Kevin's house. He parked a little further ahead, far enough not to be seen but close enough to confirm it with his own eyes. There was her car. No mistake. No confusion. The urge to get out and bang on the door was strong, but he held back. He needed to hear her voice one more time. He called. She answered with the same sleepy tone as before, like she was still lying in bed. He asked if everything was okay, and she said yes, she was sleeping, tired. Brandon then said the sentence that would tear down the act, "Funny. I'm home right now, and you're not in our bed." On the other end, complete silence. No excuse, no immediate reaction. Just silence. After a few seconds, she said she forgot to tell him, she was at her sister's place. Brandon closed his eyes. The lie came too easily. He asked her to come home. She said yes, that she was on her way. He thanked her and hung up. But he didn't leave. He stayed in the car, engine off, watching Kevin's house. The lights were on. Her car was parked there, clearly visible. His heart pounded, his blood felt like it was boiling. His mouth was dry, his mind racing. He wanted to understand what was happening, but part of him already knew. What he thought would be a happy surprise was turning into the beginning of a night that would change everything. A few minutes later, the front door opened. Haley rushed out, looking around. Then she stopped. She saw him. He was standing on the sidewalk, staring straight at her. Haley didn't say a word. The color drained from her face, her body trembled. She opened her mouth a few times, like she was searching for something to say, but no words came out. Her eyes filled with tears, and finally, the first one rolled down. Brandon stayed where he was, staring. He took a deep breath and said firmly, "Get in the car. We're going home." Kevin, behind the curtain, peeked out nervously. Brandon saw him and couldn't hold back. "I'll be back to settle things with you." And just like that, without another word between them, the woman who had sworn eternal love got into the car beside the man who had believed every promise. The silence between them said more than any argument could have. It was the beginning of the end. And Brandon, even if he didn't know it yet, would never be the same again. The drive home was completely silent. Haley stared out the window like it could hide the guilt streaming from her eyes. Brandon kept his hands on the wheel, but his mind was elsewhere, replaying every detail that once seemed normal but now carried a completely different weight. Her easy laughter with Kevin at family parties, the long hugs, the time Haley wanted to be alone during a weekend when he was away. Everything now fit together like pieces of a puzzle he never wanted to solve. As soon as they walked into the house, Brandon dropped his keys on the counter and stood still in the middle of the living room. Haley leaned near the stairs, her face still wet, shoulders shaking. He asked the one thing he needed to know, straight out, was it the first time? Her answer came low, almost a whisper, "No," that hurt more than any scream. Brandon rubbed his face and turned away for a few seconds, like he was searching for strength where there was nothing left. He didn't ask anything else. He walked to the wall and punched the light switch hard, turning on the living room light with force. What followed wasn't a conversation. It was the outburst of someone whose world had just collapsed. Brandon shouted, disorganized, spitting out questions he didn't want answers to. Haley tried to interrupt, saying it wasn't planned, that it started in a confusing way, that she'd been feeling lonely and neglected. Every excuse felt like an insult. Brandon asked if she would have ever told him, if she planned to keep going for months, if they'd ever met inside their own house. She said she'd never do that here, that she respected this space. The irony almost made him laugh. The yelling drew attention. The neighbor across the street, Mr. Thompson, appeared at the door and knocked hard. His voice carried concern. Brandon opened the door with a wild look, expecting a lecture or criticism, but the old man just asked if everything was okay. Brandon said he was dealing with a personal issue and asked him to go back inside. Mr. Thompson, used to the couple's quiet life, found the tone strange and looked past him. He saw Haley, eyes swollen, hugging herself. "Is she okay? Do you want me to call someone?" he asked, genuinely worried. Brandon laughed, but it was a bitter, dry laugh, the kind that comes after total trust has shattered. He answered bluntly, without holding back. She wants you to call someone. Then call her cousin. Or better yet, call my cousin, Kevin. Because that's who she was with. She was cheating on me with him while telling me she was lying in our bed. The impact was instant. The neighbor froze. Haley's reaction was to lower her head even further. Her face was exposed, and now her reputation was starting to crumble too. Mr. Thompson stammered something like an apology and left without looking back. Brandon slammed the door, but the loudest sound was the silence that followed. Haley, curled up near the railing, started speaking, saying she'd felt neglected, that the weeks apart created distance, that their conversations had faded. Brandon listened quietly for a few seconds, then cut her off. He said that wasn't an excuse. That there were 1,000 ways to deal with marriage problems, and she chose the dirtiest one. He turned away, went into the bedroom, and locked the door. That night didn't end with forgiveness or conversation. It ended with two strangers sleeping under the same roof, carrying different pains, but equally heavy. Brandon stared at the ceiling, while Haley, lying on the living room couch, mentally replayed every choice that led her there. The house looked the same outside, but inside, everything they'd built had already collapsed. Morning came without a word. The sun poured through the windows like the world outside was moving on normally, while inside, the shattered pieces of what was left were still scattered everywhere. Brandon was up before 6. He'd barely slept, his body exhausted, his mind broken. He got up, took a quick shower, changed clothes, and for the first time in a long time, didn't make coffee for both of them. Haley was still lying on the living room couch, as if that was some kind of sign of regret. Brandon walked past her, ignored her red eyes, and went straight to the garage. He came back with 2 suitcases and dropped them by the door. He said only that it was time to leave. Haley asked if they could talk, if there was still a chance to fix things. Brandon didn't respond. He just took the wedding ring off his left hand, placed it on the dresser by the door, and stared at it for a few seconds. She approached, apologized again, said it was a mistake, that she was willing to go to therapy, anything. Brandon kept his face closed. He was decided. There was no going back. She left with the suitcases, and he waited for the door to close before breathing freely again. That house was soaked with her image, with memories of a marriage he defended even through work-related absences. But even empty, that house still had more dignity than any word Haley had spoken the night before. Brandon knew there were still things to settle. And one of them lived just a few blocks away. He got in the car and drove straight to Kevin's house. In his head, flashes of betrayal wouldn't stop. Haley rushing out the front door, the panic on her face, Kevin's cowardly silence behind the curtain. It all played on loop like private torture. When he arrived, he parked and sat for a few minutes staring at the house. He wasn't interested in talking. He'd moved past that. He got out, went to the back, and opened the trunk. He pulled out the axe he used to chop wood in winter. This wasn't impulsive. It had been building since the night before. He walked over to Kevin's old car, a collector's model he always showed off with pride, a 1968 red Mustang, restored piece by piece over years. A personal trophy. Brandon looked at the house one last time. No movement. Not even a curtain shifted. Then he brought the axe down hard on the hood. The first strike dented the metal. The second cracked the windshield. The third opened a gash in the roof. And from there, each blow became a response to every lie, every touch between them, every time Kevin smiled at him like family while sleeping with his wife. Brandon didn't yell, didn't give a speech. He just breathed between strikes, until the tires burst and the side mirror fell. The entire car became a portrait of the rage he couldn't put into words. The front door opened, and Kevin appeared. He was in shorts and an old shirt, barefoot, his face caught between fear and shame. Brandon stood there, axe in sweaty hands, breathing hard. Kevin asked what he was doing. Brandon pointed at the wrecked car and said this was just the beginning of what he deserved. Kevin said he wanted to talk, that things weren't how they seemed, that Haley had reached out first. Brandon laughed, a disbelieving laugh, full of contempt. He threw the axe onto the grass and left without looking back. The police were called, but Brandon was already home when they phoned. He answered calmly, explained why, said he was ready to face the consequences. The officer on the line listened quietly, then said that technically it was a crime against private property, but given the circumstances, it might be treated as a minor offense. Brandon agreed to pay for the damage, no matter the cost. The price he'd pay would be less than what he'd already lost. 2 days later, his lawyer filed for divorce. Haley was notified by email. She replied with a long message full of excuses, old memories, promises of regret. Brandon didn't reply. He just forwarded the document for her signature. The divorce was finalized before the month ended. There was no court hearing. No division of assets. He gave up everything, except his peace. He sold the house the next month and disappeared from the neighborhood without saying goodbye to anyone. He left behind the neighborhood, mutual friends, the street he knew with his eyes closed. It was like that place had ceased to exist. Kevin, meanwhile, became a ghost in his own home. He was ignored at family gatherings, avoided at birthday parties, forgotten at Sunday barbecues. When he tried to reach Haley, she said she didn't want to hear from him. She said he was a mistake too. That she'd fooled herself with a fantasy that turned into a nightmare. Kevin realized too late that, for Haley, he was just the available substitute. There was no love there, only escape. Brandon watched it all from a distance, knowing silence was his greatest victory. The pain didn't vanish overnight, but his decision to move forward, without demanding explanations or offering forgiveness, was what saved his sanity. The ashes of his old life stayed in that neighborhood. The axe went back into the trunk, and slowly, his heart began to rebuild itself, without rush. Because some losses aren't healed by time, but by courage. And courage was the one thing he had most of now. Brandon disappeared from the life he'd built. After the divorce was official, he sold the house without advertising, accepted the first reasonable offer, took the money, and left. He left behind the furniture, the pictures on the walls, the memories of a marriage he thought was solid. He didn't care to take anything except documents, clothes, and the certainty that he'd never step on that street again. He chose a new city where no one knew him, a place where his name wasn't tied to a scandal, where people didn't look at him with pity or curiosity. The move was quick. He found a simple one-story house, far from nosy neighbors. He wanted silence and anonymity. Remote work made the transition easier. The company understood the address change, and for now, he stayed away from business trips. His routine became mechanical: open the laptop, answer emails, close spreadsheets, eat whatever, sleep without knowing what day it was. The energy he once used to maintain a shared life was now used to keep himself from falling into a deeper hole. At first, everything still hurt. Haley's name showed up in dreams. Sometimes he'd see a woman with similar hair at the supermarket and his chest would tighten. Other times, hearing a song on the radio would replay an old scene without warning. But slowly, that presence began to fade. Not because the betrayal stopped mattering, but because he finally understood that holding on to pain only prolonged her power over him. When he realized that, he did something he'd been putting off for weeks. He deleted all the photos, blocked her on social media, removed mutual relatives' contacts. He cut every link that could pull him back. Meanwhile, Haley was left with the weight of her choices. The neighborhood she stayed in for a while became a minefield. Neighbors stopped greeting her. The grocery store she'd shopped at since moving in now felt hostile. Just walking in, she could feel the stares, some direct, some discreet. There were whispers. People talking with disapproval. She tried to pretend it didn't matter, that she could handle it. But the humiliation grew like a stain she could no longer hide. She tried changing her look, buying new clothes, posting old photos like life was going well. But no one believed it. Friends drifted away, relatives avoided calls. Even Kevin vanished. After the car was destroyed, he sold his house, said he needed space, and left without saying where. No goodbye. No messages. Haley realized, in the end, she'd lost everything: her husband, her lover, her home, her friends, her trust. Only silence remained. A silence she'd built herself and now lived in like an invisible prison. She tried to start over, moved to another state, got a new job, rented a small apartment. She spent her days pretending to be busy, like busyness could erase what she'd done. Sometimes she thought about sending Brandon a letter, saying she still regretted it, that she understood the damage. But she always gave up when she opened her phone. What would he do with an apology after everything? She'd already destroyed everything possible. And forgiveness doesn't rebuild homes. Kevin also tasted the bitter consequences. He thought he could move on, that family would eventually forgive, that maybe Haley would become something serious. He learned the hard way that relationships built on lies rarely last. He carried the mark of a traitor within his own family. He wasn't invited to Christmas. His name was removed from group chats. Even his grandmother, who always defended him, said she was disappointed. Nothing he said could erase the image of betrayal. He lived with shame. He moved to a new city to start over, but felt like a stranger everywhere. Brandon, on the other hand, stayed silent. He didn't seek revenge or dig up the past. He was tired of hurting. He chose peace instead. He started walking every day, joined a book club, did small home repairs with his own hands. His life was simple, but light. No one there knew what he'd been through. No one looked at him with pity. He was just a man rebuilding his foundation, calm and steady, like someone who'd survived a storm and was still standing. It was during this time that he realized something he'd never seen before. The love he gave Haley was sincere, but blind. He'd been so focused on keeping the marriage alive that he ignored the signs. He swallowed the distance, the coldness in calls, the ready-made excuses. He blamed himself for not seeing it sooner. But he concluded that trusting wasn't weakness, it was strength. The ability to love fully in a world used to half measures was rare. And even though it cost him dearly, that's what made him different. Time passed. Memories lost their grip. Her name didn't hurt anymore. Anger toward Kevin turned into indifference. The story that almost destroyed everything became just that, a story. A closed chapter. A scar that, though visible, no longer hurt to touch. Brandon wasn't looking for someone new. He didn't want to erase the past with another person. He wanted to understand who he was now. And each day, he discovered there was more inside him than he'd imagined. He realized that losing everything had freed him to start right. The truth hurt, but it freed him from illusion. And in the end, that was worth more than any apology. Because when you lose what you thought was essential and still find peace, it means it was never the other person holding everything up. It was him. It always had been. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.